Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the second session of our conference this morning with our great debate. And I want to welcome you. And firstly, I want to just tell you a little bit about our debaters today. Firstly, in our red corner, and I'll introduce the motion in a minute, we have Ryan Botcher. Ryan is the Senior Managing Director and China Country Head for Tishman Speyer. Please welcome Ryan. And in our blue corner, we have Francois Trausch, who's the CEO of Allianz Real Estate. Please welcome Francois. Right, let's hear that again. Please welcome Ryan. Yay! And please welcome Francois.
Wow.
Okay, it seems to me that
Allianz
rough
start.
The crowd, right?
Yeah, that's a rough start.
So I don't know how much he paid them, but they're here.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you. Find that out later.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a simple format this morning. We have a motion. And the motion is this, that this House believes that technology and changing lifestyles will make existing real estate obsolete. Now, speaking in favor of this motion, for the motion, is Ryan, and he will begin very shortly the discussion. Speaking against this motion, not agreeing with the motion, is Francois, and he will speak against. The rules are very simple. Firstly, Ryan will begin with the proposition and to why he agrees with that. Then Francois will have an opportunity to respond and say why he disagrees with the motion. Then we'll give both Ryan and Francois an opportunity to say something more if they wish to do so. Then we'll go into a debate. I will invite them to ask each other one or two questions, and I will invite you via our iPad to ask them as many questions as you like. So get your questions ready and start sending them now. 3 minutes out from the end of the debate, I'll ask them both to summarize their positions. We'll give them a big round of applause, and then we'll take a vote on whether the people in this room agree with the motion that real estate is obsolete, or are against the motion that real estate is obsolete. Is it clear, gentlemen? Do we understand the rules?
We do.
We do. Okay, very good. Then, let's begin. Ladies and gentlemen, here we go. Ryan, please put the motion and speak in favor of the proposition.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I find this environment here quite daunting, and in fact, I feel like I should have some boxing gloves on with you, Francois, but knowing you, you're probably an expert in jiu-jitsu or something else that really wouldn't be a good idea. This is a very broad topic, especially in our industry, which is quite diverse. So to take an absolute position is somewhat challenging, but we'll endeavor to do that. I think the one thing we can all agree on is that we're in an age of rapid change, of accelerated change. We're dealing today with the amount of change in a decade that we used to have perhaps a generation to adopt to. And that change is clearly impacting human behavior, lifestyles, and of course the built environment. When I think about obsolescence in real estate, really what that means is value impairment, right? Value impairment that can only be rectified by substantial new capital investment. And there's really two forms of obsolescence. The first is functional, which deals with design, floor plates, lack of amenities, lack of technology. And we see that today in a number of industries across real estate, a number of sectors. So for instance, today in the office sector, where a lot of the growth is within the technology companies, there is a raging debate between the values of a side core building versus a center core building. There is a desire to be more horizontal in terms of how companies are organized, and less vertical, less elevator-centric. And that's a debate that's playing out in regions across the world. We can look at the retail sector, which for sure has been disrupted by technology. And if I was to look at just one small sector of the retail event, we could look at strip malls and suburban retail in the United States, which has become decimated due to technology change and behavior. The second form of obsolescence is more economic, and this is more external factors coming to have an influence on the real estate and creating loss. And for that, I think we can turn to gas stations. Perhaps not the most sexy of all real estate assets, but an asset class nonetheless. And gas stations today are going to be impacted by electric cars. We can look at parking structures, which for sure in the coming years will be impacted by the pervasive use of autonomous vehicles. And then I think there's the really big one that's out there, which is climate change, right? And there's obviously a lot of prognosticators who have their own predictions about climate change and what it's going to do to the urban infrastructures of coastal cities across the world. But to take just one, NASA anticipates that by the end of this century, sea levels will rise 26 inches, right? So there's plenty of heat maps out there that'll show you what a 2-foot increase in sea levels will do to coastal cities around the world. Suffice to say, I think that I probably would not buy a condo in Miami Beach today or a core office building on Brickell Avenue in Miami if I was anticipating long-term value appreciation.
Great, Ryan, thank you very much indeed. So technology is making all sorts of asset classes obsolete, retail malls, gas stations, parking facilities, and climate change is making almost whole cities obsolete, and therefore not places where you want to invest. Francois, please speak now against the motion.
So, of course, my perspective is a perspective which is a little bit more historical. I work for an insurance company, one of the oldest in the world, with 130 years, and the real estate of that insurance companies has gone through many revolutions. The first industrial revolution from agriculture to industrial, the second industrial revolution from industrial to electricity, the third one from electricity to mainframe, and then the fourth one we are currently today. So it's nothing new, you know, that technology comes and the real estate is still there. My second point is I live in Paris, a city which has a lot of history. And I was thinking about the topic of today, which says basically the house believes that technology and changing lifestyles make existing real estate obsolete. And the definition of obsolete is no longer used, no longer useful. And I was thinking, well, when I wake up in the morning, what do I see out of my window? And I would like to share with you what I see out of my window. And you should ask yourself the question, is this obsolete or not? Let's have a look. The Eiffel Tower, okay, built 130 years ago and still functioning. And by the way, the Eiffel Tower today is used as an observation deck, but that wasn't always the case. When it was built as a telecommunication tower to basically do radio waves across Paris, which of course today no longer used, and then it was used as well as basically advertisement and now for basically fireworks. Now, you could argue that's not real estate, that's a monument, and you could have brought that topic up. So I was thinking exactly about you, Ryan, and Tishman Speyer, because of this. What a wonderful building, Rockefeller Center, you know, bought by Tishman Speyer, when was it, 20 years ago. And despite the fact that it's a low-ceiling building, you made it one of the most successful real estate building in New York, you know, through technology. So old buildings have a nice life when it comes to basically being able to be readapted. I would like to come back just 1 minute now to where I start from, Paris, okay? And do a little bit walk in history in that regard. All of you have been to Paris, and you are very familiar with the Paris landscape and the famous Haussmann building. You know, the Haussmann building are these buildings you see all across Paris. They were designed and invented by a guy called Baron Haussmann, okay, who lived basically in the 19th century. And he basically came up with a very simple idea. He said, I'm going to basically build in Paris a certain type of house, okay? And the house is as follows, and sorry for the small digression, but I thought for a ULI crowd, a bit of real estate would be, of course, interesting. So a typical Haussmann building has retail on the ground floor, sometimes office, as well on the first floor. The second floor is the main floor. The most expensive floor is a big balcony. You have floor 3 and 4. On the 5th floor, you have lower ceiling height and a balcony, and the last floor is a maid's quarter, okay? Every building in Paris is based according to that scheme. Just walk around Paris. Actually, the building next to it has the same, basically, system. And it makes for a very attractive mixed-use building from design. The second aspect to remember about a Haussmannian building it's extremely dense. The Haussmannian buildings, as of today, 150 years later, remains the densest building on Earth, denser than a skyscraper. It has a density over 6, and why is that? Because it's built very close to each other, which has the advantage as well to be providing expensive apartment for those who can afford, and less expensive apartment for the ones living in the back, so for social mixity. My point is that 150 years later, today the Haussmannian building remains the most sought after building people want to live in Paris as a residential building. Now you could argue, fine, technology hasn't done any change, but Brian, as you mentioned, when it comes to office, expectations are different, okay? So let's take another example in my list. This is another Haussmannian building Allianz has recently repositioned into a modern office building in Paris. It's going to be the headquarters of Givenchy, the fashion house. And basically, what we have done is transformed what used to be a residential asset building in a highly functional office building. And the reason we were able to do so is, we'll put in, of course, the smart building, wired score, but more importantly, and sorry, it's in French, it's called BIM, Building Information System. Today, the digital clone of the building could be reproduced, and by doing so, of course, you can maximize how you reposition older buildings by making the air conditioning very thin, giving the building its amplitude, because you can do it digitally and then apply it more specifically on a historical building. Now, an argument can be made as well that this is all nice and good. Historical buildings, nobody wants to tear them down, you want to keep them. So it's sort of an easy argument to use. There are plenty of other examples of ugly buildings, like an ugly buildings from the 70s office building transformed into a residential building, okay? Or even that's a building which we own in Munich, well located, really ugly, 1970s style, which is being transformed into basically a shared office space, okay? So again, these are examples whereby despite technology, I would even argue because of technology, this building are no longer not only not obsolete, but they're getting a new lease of life, which is sort of unexpected. Now, the emotion says not only technology, but also changing lifestyle. Yeah. And we know that today, everybody wants to live in the city centers. Nobody wants to drive and to live and work in these office parks, okay? I would argue even office parks today with autonomous driving, this is an office park in Warsaw, it's not doing too well today, I have to admit, vacancy is sort of 30%. But, in 5 years' time, when autonomous cars will work, maybe people will be okay to live in the suburbs again and work there, okay? I have two more arguments, and then I think I'm done. I don't want to overstate my comments. One aspect which is people speak about technology is the way you build is still old-fashioned, not that different from the Egyptians and the pyramids, but with new technology, we're going to be building on the moon. The new technology will completely change the way we build, and you now have these sort of modular skyscrapers, all assembled on site, built elsewhere. This is basically even turning so that you have a 360 view. And I met the architect some time ago, and I said, I want to go and see that building. I Googled it up to see where I could see it, and what did I see? That's on Wikipedia. You can read it for yourself. Basically, this was never built. So it's a bit of an illusion to think that, new technology, will change completely the way we build and therefore makes them obsolete. Then, Brian, your very last argument was the strongest. You're right, about global warming and sea rise. And there, I have to say, I'm at a loss to come up with a good argument, because if sea level rises, indeed, all your real estate, will be underwater. And there's nothing we can do about that. Or maybe we do, maybe not for us, not for our grandchildren, but many years down the road, I think people will enjoy visiting our cities underground and being able to scuba dive and see, hidden cities. You have a few of them in China because of all the dams you are building everywhere across China. So you have all these hidden cities which disappeared. And so even in that extreme case, I think the real estate will never be obsolete. Thank you for...
So, Francois, your argument is that old buildings are still popular, that new buildings can be transformed, that even office parks in the suburbs might be renewed, and that dynamic architecture could be possible but isn't yet very successful. But even in the event of sea level rises, existing real estate will become useful as an underwater tourist attraction.
That's correct.
Yeah, so we've understood that very well. Now, Ryan, back to you. Would you like to amplify your debate, make some more comments, or even take issue with something that Francois has said?
Well, sure. First of all, I would say that Francois makes some very, very compelling arguments, aided by some terrific visuals. And, you know, usually when you're losing a debate, you need some props, and he brought those out in a very compelling way. So congratulations on...
English is not my main language, as you know. Huh? It's not my mother tongue.
I know you could do this debate in 10 languages. I would only make a couple of comments, which is that I think that we need to differentiate between the value of land in central locations and the value of sort of what is the asset that's on top of that land. Because for sure, people still want to be in city centers, although the locations are beginning to shift and change. We see that where new areas of cities that tend to have been older, more hipper, a little bit more authentic, are the areas that perhaps people want to be in terms of office or live or residential, not necessarily in the CBDs. But I also think it's important to understand that what people want is either new or old, but they don't really want new old. And new old is much more the product that was built in the 80s and early 90s. And yes, there's always exceptions to the rule of a building that has a great location that you can fill up. But for each one of those, I could show buildings that are in a 10-minute walk of where we stand today that were built in the 1980s, 1990s that frankly are obsolete, that need to be repositioned. And my definition of obsolete, again, is not necessarily that the entire building has to be razed and completely destroyed, but a substantial new capital investment needs to be invested into that asset, and that probably isn't reflected in where the value of that asset currently trades.
Great, thank you very much indeed. Now, we've got a lot of questions have come in from our audience, and the first one is for you, Francois. Yeah. It says that you've talked a lot about the residential and the office assets, particularly the ones that you see in Paris. But Ryan has made the point that shopping malls, gas stations, parking lots, and many other land uses are becoming obsolete. What do you say to that?
Well, you know, I don't want to take another argument from the Tishman Speyer book, a company I like a lot because I work for them as well. Yeah. But I recently was in London, and they developed a terrific building in London, and they transformed the parking ramp into a bicycling storage space. So the hundreds and thousands of bicycles people use in London are all parked in what used to be, I think, the parking ramp of that parking. So yeah. I think there will be other usages, you know. Last mile delivery now, I think, is targeting parking spaces. Mm-hmm. I think regarding gas station, with the superchargers, soon these gas stations will also have the opportunity to basically charge your car, not just to take gas, And listen, I lived in Japan for 5 years. Whoever has been to a gas station in Japan, it's an experience, So even if I don't need gas, I would still go there because they wash your car, they entertain you, they give you candies. It's like an entire experience. So even gas station, in my view, can be actually have a nice future.
Okay, but not as a gas station.
Maybe not as a gas station, as an electric charger station, yes? Yeah. Just call it something else station.
But I think that's the broader point, right? That is a repositioning of an existing asset. And would I go to a gas station to charge my car when I can do it at the shopping mall or in my office building or in my residential, which are now all being electrified? And I would say that the dynamic, we did have great success in London in transforming a parking space into bikes, but the reason we did is that effectively the parking ramp wasn't a spiral ramp, right? And so when you look at a lot of buildings, the challenge of that space is actually the ramping, right? So in most urban centers, when you have a high-rise building, your parking ramp is a spiral that has actual limitations of the physical structure for the types of trucks you'd want to put up there for last mile distribution or for repositioning in different ways. That was an example of an asset that did work, but the bones of it made it work.
I think it's of course a good argument. History is always it teaches us about things, and take a city like Berlin. Berlin had built all these big bunkers during the World War II, you know, and the question is, what do you do with them, especially when the wall came down, and some of these big bunkers, which were built during the war, are now used as art gallery. There's nothing better than concrete to have an art gallery, so I would argue maybe your parking space could be a contemporary art gallery.
Very nice. So, gentlemen, we seem to have two big themes coming here. One is that actually whether a particular piece of real estate is obsolete depends on your ability to transform it. And the second thing we seem to be saying very clearly in this conversation is that new uses of real estate, and particularly the ability of technology to enable them, seems to be key. Now, we have a lot more questions.
Well, you know, I didn't come up with the argument of raised floors. You know, you used to have to say ceiling height is most important.
Yeah.
If it's not 3 meters, forget it. You know, you can't touch a building, okay? People are getting taller by the minute, okay? In reality, you know, with
Certainly Ryan's very tall.
I think I'm shrinking as I stand on the stage today. So
with 5G, you know, and Wi-Fi, honestly, you know, the notion of the double ceiling now, or the double flooring is becoming irrelevant.
Yeah. Well, now we have a question here from Professor Michael Enright, and I'm going to direct it to you, Ryan. He says that with inertia, with policy, and with expense, don't they all prevent technology and lifestyles from having the impact that they should otherwise have? In other words, are we preventing the adaptation process by really not allowing technology and lifestyle to make the changes they should?
You know, I think it depends on where you are in the world. And certainly it could be in the U.S. today that there is certainly some inertia to change. When we have a president that is a climate skeptic, so he may be the one to buy the Brickell Avenue building. But in other areas, you're seeing enormous change. I think we can look at the retail sector here in China and to see sort of how technology has come in to impact and change the physical spaces that we have for retail. So I don't think that this is even across the board. But fundamentally, I believe that the next generation of people, millennials, generation Z, want to live in a very different world and a different environment than my generation. And that's going to impact the physical spaces and how they occupy those spaces on a go-forward basis.
I think I would just add that, you know, this new generation, in my view, will also oppose systematic demolition of what's existing for two reasons. One, technology is changing very fast, okay, and makes you change very fast, and you want to hold on to some roots, things you know, things maybe your parents knew, and I think there will be a bigger push not to demolish buildings, notwithstanding the fact that demolishing a building is extremely impactful on the environment. It's probably one of the most impactful aspects, and so I think the push to keep existing structure is going to increase over time, rather than demolishing.
Let's take a quick debate in the room, ladies and gentlemen, a quick vote. Are you in general in favor of more demolition of buildings, or we keep it as it are? Who's in favor of more demolition? Raise your hands. More demolition. Let's see. Okay.
All the developers, please raise your hand. You know?
People against more demolition. Let's see you. Okay, right, there we go. Well, that's like 5 to 95 in that debate. Francois, a question that's been asked is this. It says, yes, okay, there's lots of beautiful old buildings that stand the test of time. But actually, isn't Ryan right that the problem is that there are too many modern buildings that are really ugly and very difficult to repurpose?
That's correct. You know, and to be frank, you know, I mentioned the example of Haussmann because I think this guy was a genius in building and coming up with a concept, okay? Good buildings will stand the test of time and should be allowed to remain. And you're right, there are also buildings which were not well built, which, you know, probably don't have a future life. And I think that's probably the work of forums like ULI to really enable us to make buildings which don't have that problem, which we know 200 years from now, despite the technology or because of the technology, will still be very relevant. I think on this point, I'm sure Ryan and I are on the same page.
Well, let's see.
No, I would absolutely agree. You know, I think that there is a differentiation of buildings, and that's why making a generalized statement of this nature is so challenging. And certainly there is great value in some old buildings that are well located, right? But those buildings still need a substantial amount of capital investment in order to be in operation the way they are today, to meet the energy code requirements of today, to meet the functionalities that people want and the flexibility. And And even at Tishman Speyer at Rockefeller Center, which is still a beautiful building and complex.
And still
thank you
useful.
very much.
Still
for that.
useful, yeah.
Still is full. We invest enormous amount of capital to keep it that way. And if we didn't, which unfortunately is the case of a lot of other buildings in many cities, you see vast deterioration of value.
Okay, gentlemen, there's one final question that's come in here that I'd like you both to speak to, which says, isn't real estate actually technology's roadkill? What do you think about that?
Wow, I mean, I'm not even sure what that means. What's the definition of technology roadkill? As in technology will never penetrate real estate as an asset class?
Well, I think that technology is killing real estate is the point.
I see. Technology is killing real estate.
Yeah.
I don't believe that at all. I think that technology is creating enormous opportunities. Whether you can seize that opportunity or not is a different question.
Okay.
I think the more technology advances, the more the physical aspect will be very important, you know. Think about it, you know, where you eat, where you date, where you sleep, where you travel, you know, all of this is in your app, but in reality, you still need to meet the person you want to meet on your app, or you still want to go to a place to have dinner with your friends. So I just think that, you know, the more technology advances, the more the physical real estate will be important, and I think the technology will make the real estate better at the end of the day, and vice versa.
Okay, gentlemen, I'm going to ask you now to summarize your views. The motion that we're debating is that technology and changing lifestyles will make existing real estate obsolete. Francois, you're speaking against the motion. I'd like you to summarize your position.
It will be short because I already presented it, but I think history is teaching us that technology is not making existing real estate obsolete. On the contrary, it shows us that you know, technology is enabling old real estate. Whoever had a muse in London when horses were around today probably has a very nice apartment in London, which used to be a horse stable. So we are in the fourth industrial revolution. There were three other industrial revolutions which went through history, and they showed that real estate remains and can still be useful.
Great. Thank you very much indeed. Ryan, I'd like you to summarize the argument in favor of the motion.
Sure. You know, the first skyscraper was built in 1885 in Chicago, 100 years before the internet. And today, we can certainly build higher than that. That was only 42 meters, so that's thankful. But the reality is a lot hasn't changed within our industry. It remains fragmented. It remains antiquated. And in many cases, real estate as an industry is one of the least digitalized industries out there. But that's beginning to change. We're seeing that effect changing in buildings today. How many people here in this audience are now actively auditing their IT infrastructure in anticipation of 5G and the Internet of Things to come? How many of us are really prepared for virtual reality, augmented reality, and how that's going to impact how we use the built environment that surrounds us? You know, we're already seeing behavioral change impact certain sectors of our business. So for instance, in the office sector, from 2010 to 2018 in New York City, job creation was up 22%. So 22% over that period of time. Absorption of space was up 4%. 22% job creation, 4% absorption. And that's the densification story, right? The utilization of space in a very different way. So what happens over the next 10 years, right? This was during a period of great job creation. Over the next 10 years, there's many people who believe that AI will impact urban job growth and that perhaps in urban centers around the world, there'll be millions of jobs that are lost. That'll have a significant impact. Now, it's not all bad news, right? I think AI working with building management systems will certainly improve operating costs, energy efficiency, health in buildings, and create a better experience. And I think that technology is going to come and solve the issue of vacancy, really create the untapped potential of vacancy, where vacancy in the future is going to become a service because those spaces are going to be repositioned continuously during the day for active use. I think the main point of this, though, is that not all buildings are prepared for that future. Some are, and some will be successful. Many are not, and those that are not are going to require a substantial amount of capital to be able to get there.
Great, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, let's thank our two fantastic speakers. Now, what we're going to do, gentlemen, is we're going to take a vote in the room to see what people in the room think. And then I have one final question to ask you that's come in while you've been speaking. So can we go to the poll now, please? And we're going to essentially put the same question we've been debating. This House believes that technology and lifestyles will make existing real estate redundant. Do you agree or do you not agree? Please keep voting.
Yikes.
Okay, we're getting there. We'll take a few more moments. Now, of course, this is what we call a vested interest audience. Given that almost everybody in the room is invested in real estate, of course, you would think it's not obsolete. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be here. But let's freeze the debate there. We'll say
I think we need more time. We're
it's
going up.
We'll keep
fine.
talking then. Keep talking. So
killed it.
that point about climate change was really powerful, Ryan, actually. So, oh, yeah, look, it's moved up now. Okay, so 71% plays 29%. Congratulations to both of you. Fantastic conversation. One question came in right at the end.
So who is the winner? Just to
Well, the winner of the
Come
debate...
on, this is ULI. Everyone's a winner.
ULI, good idea.
Everyone's
Okay.
a winner. But let's just say 71% of the room disagree with the motion. They believe that we can reposition real estate. But nearly 30% of the people in the room actually do think that obsolescence is a major issue that we have to confront. Gentlemen, one final question very quickly. Somebody raised the cheeky question, do you think that the most sustainable real estate in the future will be on this planet or on another planet?
If you like diving, it will be this planet.
Okay, if you like diving, it'll be here.
I have to say I'm betting on the human race.
Right,
Good.
okay, very good. Ladies and gentlemen, Francois Trausch and Ryan Botcher, thank you.